All right, so Josh, here we are. It is already what? It's almost July, isn't it? Yeah,
4th of July, right around the corner.
right around the corner. Can't believe it. I feel like it was just AEP, but now we're preparing for the next AEP. I think the Earth's spinning a little faster. But good to have you. There's a lot of noise right now in our industry. This is that time of year where there's disruption. There's a lot of talk.
Mm-hmm.
What is the topic right now? Non-commissionable plans.
Yeah.
So if you don't know about Josh, he's been in the industry a long time on the carrier side. He's been on the external side and has a really good big picture understanding, I think, of what's going on. And so we're hoping in this episode to just give you more of a macro view of why this is happening, what the implications are for your business, and hopefully you come out of this feeling better, is what we're hoping. So
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
So I think it's important to start the conversation around non-commissionable plans by identifying that it's not a new mechanism for carriers to utilize in the industry. In fact, I remember back when I was working at UnitedHealthcare, we had acquired Care Improvement Plus, and there were plans that we made non-commissionable in the middle of the year. And generally when that lever is pulled by a carrier, it's because of a couple different things that may be happening. One is that the plan isn't making money. It's not profitable. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing right now. But the other scenario could be that there's just overlap in plans. Again, in that scenario, United already had products that were similar to some of the Care Improvement Plus products that they acquired. And so they were going to sunset those products in the subsequent year. And so they're going to go ahead and make those plans non-commissionable to disincentivize enrollment. So whatever that strategy is, it's been used in the past. We're seeing it more frequently, especially in the last 12 months. Last AEP was unprecedented because we saw that tool of non-commissionable being used in the middle of AEP.
Yep.
And of course, that's very disruptive to agents. It's very disruptive to Medicare beneficiaries because it takes product that might have been a really good option for some kind of off the shelf. And also when we talk about non-commissionable plans, it's important to note the difference between suppression and non-commissionable. Suppression is when carriers simply suppress or remove a plan off of the enrollment tools. What does that do? That immediately takes the call centers out of being able to write that plan. Mm-hmm. So no longer in Connecture, no longer in Sunfire, no longer on the carrier platform. That plan can only be written now by an agent with the old school paper app.
Yep.
And for field agents, again, it's a little bit more difficult. Yeah. You probably don't have those kits maybe just laying around. You're used to doing business through an electronic platform.
Yep.
But it is still commissionable and it still can be written. But knowing that call center business is probably a good 50% of the volume out there, that immediately slows down volume without a carrier having to go the next step, which is making it non-commissionable.
Got it.
Of course, when they make it non-commissionable, some carriers still leave it out on the enrollment platforms and allow agents to still write that plan if it's in the best interest of the consumer. But it's, of course, a much larger deterrent for agents to write business. And so I think it's just very important to distinguish those two things.
Yep.
Now, I think let's talk a little bit about what's happening now. Of course, we just got hit with news recently that UnitedHealthcare announced 15% of their PPO portfolio went non-commissionable, over 100 plans across the country. And of course, that sent waves through the industry. The biggest player out there, UnitedHealthcare, is making a large chunk of plans non-commissionable. It's important to note that most of those are PPO plans. And PPOs are financially pressured more so than an HMO. Why is that? Because HMOs have controlled networks. They have contracts with physicians. Yep. And they can control profit a lot more on a PPO.
They can afford the $0 premium.
You got it.
Yeah.
The PPO, you have out-of-network access, so it's going to be more costly for the carrier to operate. It's tougher to manage a PPO plan from just
it's not as predictable for them.
Yeah, the risk adjustments aren't going to be as favorable. So we already know that those are the lower margin plans in a carrier's portfolio. So seeing that some of these PPO plans with non-commissionable isn't really a big surprise to me, right? We know we're already in a turbulent time for Medicare Advantage.
Yep.
We know there's a lot of things happening under the carrier's roof. And what are those? One is V28. And if you haven't heard of V28, it's a risk adjustment model that's new to carriers. It was implemented in 2024 and it goes through 2026. And it's phased in each year. 2026, it's fully phased in. And it's extremely disruptive for the carriers. The risk adjustment, how they're paid, is changing. So they're having to reconfigure how they're working with providers, how they're pricing plans to adjust to this really tightening of the belt financially.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, you have the IRA that was introduced. We talked a lot about this last year, of course, when it was hitting us the hardest with the Part D changes, but it shifted an enormous amount of financial liability to the carriers.
Yep.
And they are having to adjust to that.
They're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. And we've seen it in the Part D market.
Yeah.
Almost all Part D plans now are non-commissionable.
Yeah.
You know, we predict that pretty much the Part D market will go non-commissionable until the IRA is remedied.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have utilization trends that are unfavorable.
Yep.
There was speculation that this post-COVID hike in utilization was going to eventually go down. We saw UnitedHealthcare really strategize well with this, where they were on the sidelines in terms of product investment post-COVID.
Yeah.
You saw Aetna and Humana make big investments. And then this last year, Aetna and Humana had to term a bunch of products, had to make some adjustments and degradate plans, where UnitedHealthcare came out very aggressive for 2025.
Yep.
Well, we get through the first quarter, we hear an earnings call from UnitedHealthcare, and the stock drops 20%, and then more after that, because
Yep.
utilization was indeed not going down. The trend line was still very unfavorable.
Yep.
And if you kind of think about this logically, I mean, the largest population that we serve is the boomer population. The boomers are now getting older. And as they continue to age, they're going to get sicker. We're going to see more utilization. The issue is that while this trend is occurring with utilization, Medicare Advantage plans aren't getting more funding. They're getting less funding. The last few years, just until this year, we had a nice surprise that there was an increase in the Medicare Advantage reimbursement rates, but it's not enough to remedy all of these changes with risk adjustments, with utilization, with the IRA. So we're still seeing carriers have to grapple with this. So fast forward now, we're seeing UnitedHealthcare make this move. It signals that PPOs are not going to be invested in this year. We're probably going to see a lot of benefit cuts with PPOs. The Medicare Advantage market is shifting back more to an HMO focused market. I don't think you're just going to see UnitedHealthcare make changes on PPO. If PPO is being financially pressured from United, it's being pressured by the other carriers as well.
Yeah.
But once we get through these risk adjustment changes, 2026 final implementation, hopefully there's some legislation that remedies some of the IRA. I think Dr. Oz is taking probably a hard look at these utilization trends, and does there need to be more funding put into the Medicare Advantage program to balance this out? But I can tell you that we're in the midst of a correction period now, and we'll get out of this. We've been through this before. We've seen other, eras where Medicare Advantage was not profiting as much when the ACA was introduced. And we saw a response to that. It was, less and less zero premium plans, right? More had a $10, $15, $20, $30 premium, more deductibles,
Yep.
Higher MOOPs. But guess what? That creates disruption, and that creates opportunity at the same time, because consumers are shopping, agents are going to have more opportunity to convert and write business.
Yep.
Agents that have a large book of business, retention is key, right? You have to spend time now, if you haven't already, making sure you've got your CRM set up, making sure you know how to drip to your clients, making sure that you're putting in a strategy for retention. If you're a brand new agent, well, hey, welcome to the party. It's time to go out and write business.
Yeah.
In years where plans are stable or plans are just getting better every year, if somebody gets their annual notice of change, like, oh, my plan got better, I think I'll just stick with it.
Yeah.
In years where, wow, my costs are going up, or my plan's being terminated, or my provider's no longer in network, that's creating shopping. So agents have opportunity there. It's just being aware of what's coming around the corner so that you're prepared.
Love that perspective. I think you're essentially saying one could infer, you don't know for sure, that if you have clients and you are getting these notifications that maybe one of the plans you have them on is going non-commissionable, the carrier is clearly not wanting to invest in that plan going forward, right?
Yep.
So there could be some changes for them that you need to be ahead on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you're saying, that could bring other people, when they're getting their letters, they need to shop, right?
Yeah.
So be proactive right now about that. The other thing I was going to say is you'll see agents in like the Facebook groups and the different communities online. The moment they hear non-commissionable, they think they're done with us agents. They're trying to get rid of us. They, I'm not working for free. You hear all this stuff.
Oh yeah.
And we always encourage people, like, be a little careful, because the carriers and everybody are in those groups too. It's kind of just a little side note, but careful what you're posting in there. But help us know why that's not the case. Why is that a false understanding of what's happening?
Yeah, and I don't want to discount the initial reaction from agents, right? Let's be clear. Non-commissionable plans is not a good thing for agents, right? No business can operate without being profitable. Carriers can't operate without profitable plans. Agents can't operate without being paid a commission. However, I think it's important to note that carriers are in this situation where they need to have these levers they can pull to stop the bleeding. Just as an example, I know one of the plans that went non-commissionable in the state of Texas for UnitedHealthcare was losing more than $70 million already this year. So if you're a business owner and you have a product and it's losing money hand over fist, you're going to want to stop that bleeding. If carriers didn't have that mechanism, then could that plan then have lost $150 million, and that spills over and impacts other plans? So I think again, we have to be very clear. We don't support this trend of going non-commissionable, but we also understand that there's incredible financial pressure on the carriers, and that the system isn't really designed to mitigate those kinds of changes in the market.
Yep.
Humana doesn't know what UnitedHealthcare is going to do, or what WellCare is going to do, or what Aetna is going to do. Everybody kind of shows their cards in September, August timeframe. They war game on what they think another carrier is going to do based on financial performance of plans, but there's irresponsible carriers out there, right? There's carriers that are willing to take a loss to gain market share. So if a carrier pulls out and then all of a sudden another carrier gets this windfall of business, and maybe it's on one of these PPO products that was barely making any money, now it's losing money because it took on a ton of membership it wasn't expecting, then carriers need to be able to mitigate that. Unfortunately, agents and consumers have a negative response from that, because that might have been the best plan for a consumer in the market, or an agent may have put a bunch of money behind marketing for that plan. So I fundamentally disagree with carriers being able to make plans non-commissionable during AEP. But if we can get that information just before AEP, this plan is going non-commissionable, we know, okay, we don't want to put emphasis on that plan. These carriers are our partners at the end of the day. We want to support the plans that are healthy for the carrier. And so we'll move in that direction. So, it's important to understand both sides of the scenario here. I don't think it's doomsday. I don't think we're going to see, a large trend in the MA space. I think in the standalone Part D space, we've kind of already seen that trend play out.
Kind of writing's on the wall.
It's on the writing's on the wall. I do feel eventually we'll have commissionable Part D plans again, but they've got to be financially solvent for the carrier. But with Medicare Advantage, we've seen Anthem make some big changes this year, indicate they're going to get out of the MA space, focus just on D-SNP. WellCare had some plans that were non-commissionable in AEP. They turned back on commissionable this summer. So those plans had a little bit of a breather, chance to get them back on a solid foundation financially, and now they're looking like they're back to wanting to have more appetite on those plans. So we have to be respectful of the marketplace in general and how carriers are going to have to operate. They're not making these decisions to cut out the agent. They're making these decisions to help plans perform that are healthy financially. And for the ones that aren't, disincentivize enrollment.
I think that's certainly the distinction. And that's the point I think we're trying to make is if it happens during AEP, that is not good for anybody. But fingers crossed, because all of this is happening now, it's safe to not completely assume, but kind of infer that this probably won't be a mid-AEP thing going on this year, at least we would hope, because they're already preparing now. Can't make any promises, but that's the hope. And that's the thing I think we should be raising our voices about with the carriers and with our associations is like, hey, that's fine. We understand the business situation here. Heads up, please. That would be the request. Please, more heads up. And in some ways, that seems to be what is happening. It's more of a heads up. One way of looking at the Part D situation is, and this isn't going to be true across the board, but you may have clients out there or prospective clients who have been on a med sup for years. Honestly, they don't have to be on a med sup. Maybe their premiums have gone way up, and they might be open to Medicare Advantage this year. So you might have some people that are standalone Part D that actually this is the year they go full MAPD anyway. We don't know for sure, but there's different ways to be looking at this. Because that's the other thing going on. Med sup premiums are really going up right now.
That's true.
There was something we were talking about before we started recording. To further encourage the agents on the financials, they're getting a raise. What did we say that number was?
11% raise. I was just looking at it. 626 for 2025, 694, almost $700 in 2026. And then the renewal went up from 313 to 347. So 11% across the board, which is a healthy increase. It's more significant than we've seen in years.
Understand too, this past year was an election year, obviously. We now know who the CMS administrator is, at least for the next few years. That also, I think, probably helps things get re-established, I think, settle down a little bit. So again, I think the point of this today is just help everybody just understand this from more of a macro, industry-wide level. On the broker link, we've got a resource to where you can view all the non-commissionable plans. We're adding to that as we get closer to AEP. And then, as we were saying, the carriers, before you know it, they're going to be making their new plan announcements. And so your plan of action is look at the non-commissionable, see if you have any current members in that bucket and know that you're going to need to do some outreach to them. See what the new plans are and go from there. But don't panic. Don't panic.
And I think, to that point about we're trying to keep agents aware of what plans are non-commissionable. Last year during AEP, every day it seemed like we were getting some carrier making some plans non-commissionable to the point where Sunfire couldn't even keep up. So agents were going into Sunfire, enrolling in plans that very well they thought they were getting paid a commission and weren't. That's another reason why it's so problematic during AEP. Is agents need to know exactly which plans are commissionable and not commissionable.
Or what's worse, what would happen, because I've seen this firsthand, you enrolled someone in a plan that became non-commissionable, the carrier paid you a commission, and then over the summer they're charging you back
Yeah, even worse.
Even worse.
Yeah.
We're hoping this year won't be that way.
Yeah, and I think that's been heard loud and clear.
Yep.
I think the carriers are going to do everything they can to notify us up front. These are the plans that are non-commissionable. Of course, I think there's always those unexpected market changes, like the example I gave earlier, where a plan terms and then a lot of that membership goes to a carrier that they just didn't realize that kind of volume was coming in. So could we see some non-commissionable plans still during AEP? It wouldn't surprise me, but I think that they're going to do everything they can to give agents a heads up and allow the enrollment tools to either suppress the plan or in Sunfire, if they choose not to suppress it, it says non-commissionable.
Yep.
So agents can be aware before they take it, enrollment.
You've told me before, and sorry I'm putting you on the spot, the percentage of carrier distribution that's field-based. Do you remember what that number is? On average,
it's trended more favorably to field distribution than last year, but it's sitting at about 51%.
Okay.
Every carrier is going to have a little bit different of a mix, but that's about the number that we saw coming out of AEP this year.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so, with all the technology that exists, all the disruption we faced over, gosh, I've been in this thing for 6 years, and every year is just disruption. I guess maybe that's how it's always been. I don't know. Seniors still want to meet with their agents.
Yeah.
And you as a company are not going to let go of that 51% of your sales force.
Oh, no. Yeah.
You can't afford to do that. So play the long game, hang in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. In times of disruption, beneficiaries want to meet with somebody locally, right? They want to meet with somebody that can give them all of the information in a way they can understand it.
Yep.
On the phone, you just don't have that same experience.
Yep.
There's great agents on the phone, but the majority of them probably came into this business as a rookie, got trained for several weeks in a call center environment, and they're on the phones.
Yep.
Field agents, most of them have pretty long tenure. They've been doing this for a while. They understand their local market better than anybody could in a call center.
Yep.
So consumers are aware of that. The COVID era definitely helped call centers get some traction, but there's been some hangover from that, and consumers were put on plans that weren't the best for them. And you can be assured that those members that were impacted negatively are now going back to their agent in the street.
Great point. Great point. So many people got burned during that season of a lot of fraud, a lot of craziness going on. And tell you what else just came to my mind is back before AI really started taking off, there's always been that concern of agents like, oh my gosh, they're going to try to replace us with health or Medicare.gov or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're noticing now is, I'm seeing it all the time on YouTube and different things, examples of AI, like fake videos, fake phone calls, almost as like a caution to people, like basically don't trust anything online.
Right.
Seniors are getting that message loud and clear.
Okay.
All that just to say, we're going to get to a point where, this is just a personal prediction, where when it comes to those big decisions in life, like your health plan, you really want to see that person and look them in the eye when you're having that conversation. Yeah. That's the only thing you can verify is legit. So it's a good time to be a field agent, I guess is my point.
It's an excellent time. And, health insurance is an important purchase. It's not something that, especially as you're getting older and you're going to the doctor more, you're going to take lightly, right? You're going to want to make a very informed decision.
Yep.
And maybe you're comfortable buying your auto insurance, over the phone or online, but that's much different than your health insurance.
Yep.
And so I do feel that the field agent
it is so different.
Is critical in this time.
I don't know why that is, but it is so different.
Mm-hmm.
Like the auto insurance versus health and Medicare. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think, if you go through an auto claim and you get burned, right, and you didn't have enough coverage, then maybe you want to talk to an agent. But generally, you've got, a few different options, and you make your choice, and it's it's just a price game at that point.
Yeah.
It's not like the levels of coverage are extremely critical.
Yeah.
Versus with health insurance, there's a lot of variables there that if you don't get, a provider that's in network or a drug that's covered or a particular facility you want to visit, that all can be very problematic for your healthcare journey. And so, and you're locked in a lot of times in those plans. So it's an important decision, and it's changing so much. There used to be, kind of a narrative that you pick a couple carriers that you like doing business with in a market and you can stick with them. Well, now we have great tools like Sunfire and Simply Enroll that can quickly do the math for you based on drugs, based on doctors, based on preferences from the consumer. And hey, that plan that you might have never really taken a look at this year is looking really good. So it's important for agents to use technology, make sure you're looking across all plans in the market and really guiding your consumer and your beneficiary to that right fit.
Great. Well, we have the kickoffs are coming up before you know it. We're doing that August and September this year. So be on the lookout for that. Anything Medicare related, your certifications, first looks, this non-commissionable, you can find all of that in the broker link. Just go to products and then Medicare, and you'll see all that in one place. Anything else you want to close with?
No, just a big thank you to all of our agents out there, all of our agency partners. We couldn't be doing what we're doing without all of you. We just want you to know that we're here if you want to talk through any of these challenges that are happening. We're constantly trying to put out programs like our member retention program, like the updates we have in the broker link, working with partners like Sunfire to recommend enhancements and just try to do our best to help navigate. But we're in an amazing industry. The Medicare Advantage market, while it feels a little turbulent right now, what better business to be in, than a product category that's exponentially growing year after year. It's now over 50% of the market. So it's getting more scrutiny, right? It's become this very large component of the Medicare ecosystem, where at one point it was only 1 out of every 5 people on Medicare Advantage. It was small. So I do think too, just last thing, you made a comment earlier about MedSup. I think it's also important to note that with a lot of the plan terms, I think we're going to see more plan terms this year, just like last year. Carriers are kind of picking and choosing, where they really want to invest, the products that are profitable. But when they terminate a plan, those individuals have a guaranteed issue back into a MedSup. And yes, it is pricey, but it sometimes is the better fit. And so, I think this is the first year where we actually saw original Medicare grow. It grew by a couple 100,000 lives versus the last decade. It's been eroding every single year while Medicare Advantage has been growing. Medicare Advantage grew. It didn't grow at the rate it has in the past. But it's just important to note that original Medicare did have a little uptick. And I think some of that's because, providers are terming Medicare Advantage in some cases and telling people they'd prefer original Medicare. The rural areas are struggling with Medicare Advantage and how to really grapple with network adequacy. So make sure MedSup's in your portfolio. And then ancillary is a no-brainer. This year, in a rising cost environment, copays getting more expensive, MOOPs getting more expensive, package that in Medicare Advantage plan with a hospital indemnity product so that you can help offset that rising cost. And at the same time, you as an agent are better equipping your customer for any kind of healthcare scare episode that comes up. And you as an agent can earn more commission because you're now coupling that with an ancillary product. So it's a win-win for you and your client.
It's so straightforward too. Like there's not even really much to sell with that because the tools that we have, whether you're doing it in Sunfire or the carriers are now providing these tools, it'll show you every single out-of-pocket potential in that MA plan and what it would cost on a dollar amount to cover that. And the premiums are so reasonable that, if I was on Medicare Advantage, speaking, if I have a $0 premium and you're telling me that for $60, $70 a month
or less,
pretty much all my out-of-pocket's covered. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
And you kind of get to be the superhero. I mean, another thing to think about is how many potential referrals could that also bring you? Because if you are starting to offer this as a package, that other Medicare Advantage agent down the street that might be captive or doesn't do any ancillary,
Mm-hmm.
they might hear about this. So
yeah, great point.
I guess our conclusion is it's a good year of opportunity. Keep your head up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Want to close it with that?
That's a great closing.
All right, cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.